1948, aspiring pro wrestler Dory Funk, Dory, to his friends and family, moved his wife and 2 young sons from Hammond, Indiana to Amarillo, Texas. Over the next 50 years, the name Funk would become synonymous with pro wrestling from the Texas Panhandle to Tokyo, Japan. In a city of hard-riding cowboys and hard-living farmers, Dory Funk would gain a reputation as the toughest man in Texas. In a sport filled with street fighters and shady promoters, he would become known as one of the most honest and influential men ever to set foot in a ring or own a territory. The business he helped build as the main event star and later the owner and promoter would fill West Texas arenas for 3 decades, launch the careers of countless pro wrestling superstars, innovate matches and promotional tactics still in use today, and leave a legacy that lasts well into the 21st century. His 2 sons, Dory Jr. and Terry, would grow up to become the only brother combination ever to achieve the pinnacle of pro wrestling, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Their careers would last more than half a century as well, influencing the stars of today in more ways than their father could have ever dreamt of. The dozens of men trained, mentored, and broken in by Dory Funk Sr. and the Amarillo territory would become some of the biggest box office attractions, prolific bookers, and preeminent promoters in the sport. Outside the ring, generations of Texans would come to view Funk as a father figure due to his support of and contributions to charitable causes such as the Boys Ranch. The entire world of pro wrestling today would be radically different if not for the presence of Dory Funk Sr. But it all started in Amarillo, a geographically isolated, hardscrabble Texas town that would become famous in every corner of the globe, in large parts due to his efforts. The story of Amarillo wrestling begins with the story of Dory Funk Sr., and therein begins our tale. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another thrill-packed episode of Back to the Territories here for Kayfabe Commentaries. I'm Jim Cornette, and tonight we have jumped back into the DeLorean. We have roared back to another great wrestling territory of the past, this time a very unique, a very overlooked territory, Amarillo, Texas. And joining us to talk about that very subject, a man uniquely qualified to discuss Amarillo, Texas, and wrestling in general, the turbulent Texan himself, Terry Funk. And Terry, I appreciate you
Cornette,
taking the ride with us.
Pleasure being here. Pleasure being here. And want to take a ride with you, too.
Well, there you go. And
into the past, because I'll tell you what, it's always loved my daddy. And I always loved the Funk family whenever they were all together, and we were ramrodding things throughout the country, and it was a wonderful time.
The Funk family...
A blessed time.
A blessed time. The Funk family did not start with your father, Dory Sr., because your grandfather, Adam, was a pretty notorious bad guy to deal with he was in law enforcement, but for the Al Capone gang on the south side of Chicago, Hammond, right across the border from Chicago. And
that's exactly right. In
the roaring 20s, he had some run-ins with people. Did he actually had a number of killed in the line of duties, didn't he?
Yes, he did. I don't know about killed, but he shot 11 people. And that's a lot of people to shoot.
Well, and if his aim was any good, he had to get 1 or 2 of them
Well, I
at
think
least,
maybe 1 or 2, but he went ahead and he shot 11 people. And then one of the persons that he shot was a guy that was, he was a farmer that went nuts, and he got up in a silo back in all of Indiana. I don't know if you've seen the silos back here or not, but they were just, they hold grain, and they hold grain for their cattle and stuff. But they had an area up in the top where you could go up, kind of an area that you could look around at. A
loft type of thing.
A loft type of thing. And this one farmer went nuts, and he started shooting people out of there, kind of like some of the things that we hear in this day and age, but it was way back here. And he shot like 11 people, and I don't know how many of them died, but some of them died, and some of them didn't. My grandfather was told him he was a police officer at the time, and he told him to take the paddy wagon. That's a wagon that you'd pile them all into that you see in the movies and stuff and everything, and opened the back doors on it, got in there, and he said, back the paddy wagon right up to the house, to the silo. And he went ahead and jumped out of the paddy wagon and went up the stairs in the silo on up the top, and the other guy was coming down, and the other guy had, my grandfather had a shotgun, and they had pistols, and he went ahead and, you know, the guy had firearms, and he was coming down, and my grandfather was going up. They came around the corner, and my grandfather went ahead and shot first, and shot the top of his head off. And but what was very wonderful about that is, you know, he saved a lot of people. That guy.
That was a tough time.
He caused a lot of damage to a lot of families in that area.
That was a tough time to be in law enforcement in the Chicago area in the Roaring '20s, when it was literally the birth of organized crime.
Oh, it was the birth of organized crime, and my father was part of it, because he would go into the Calumet was between Hammond and Chicago, you know, and it's kind of right on the border there, you know, and my father would go over there, and they had slot machines in Calumet City, you know, and so he'd go ahead in Calumet, go over to there, and he'd play the slot machines, and if you play them, back then they had where you put in your quarters, and it would show you the quarters, you know.
Yeah.
But he was using slugs in there, and then, you know, it was an illegal thing to do in the first place, but they went ahead and caught on to my father doing that, and my father had to leave town, you know. So he left town on a freight train, and he left all summer long, and my grandfather couldn't figure out why he was gone. You know, he was gone because those guys were looking for him. That's right.
Well,
but anyhow.
How did your dad first get involved in wrestling? Because he started as an amateur, didn't he?
Oh, he was a great amateur. He really was. As he went ahead, and he was one of the very, very few 4-time state champions in high school. And he was a state champion for Indiana all 4 years, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. Then he went to Indiana University. And he met my mother, and they got married, and then, you know, they didn't have anything like that during World War II, where, you know, you're married or you're not married or anything like that. They just ship your butt off, you know. And so my father went ahead and instead of World War II came along, and instead of getting drafted, he could have to go to the Army or whatever. He wanted to go to the Navy, so he enlisted in the Navy at that time and spent 4 years in the Navy.
And then was it when he got out of the service that he first turned pro? Because at the time, Chicago was a wrestling hotbed.
It was a hotbed, and he tried to get into business up there, and they didn't want him to get in. So they went ahead and they had some very tough shooters at the time, and my father went through one of them, went through two of them, and then I can't remember the one's name, but they brought him in there, and my father went ahead and broke his leg, and they went ahead and they decided they better go ahead and smarten him up.
Well, that's those days.
That's true story.
In those days, you had to prove yourself first, and your dad, he wasn't a heavyweight, right? He was more of a light heavyweight.
Well, you know, that's the funny thing about it, though, is because back then, nobody was a heavyweight. The heavyweights were all looked down at. They were all big, fat slobs. You know, and they were all junior heavyweights at the time. That was in the 205 and less.
Yeah.
You know, but then a long time, about early 1950s, along came the heavyweights. You know, and my father moved up with them in, you know, but junior heavyweight was a big thing in the country at that time. The heavyweights were considered fat, big slobs. You know, like, and that was like over 210 pounds. That's how this world has changed. That's how people have changed.
Well, there weren't
That's how much better we're eating.
Yeah, or how much more we're eating.
There was, you know.
So Fred Kohler was the boss in Chicago. He was the one that started the network TV on the Dumont network. He controlled Chicago International Amphitheater.
I think it was when.
Dumont.
Right.
And he controlled the whole area. And your dad started out under him, but he had to branch out and went to a few different territories. How did he come?
That's where he went ahead. That's where he went ahead, and they started him. He came up here. I want to be a wrestler. So what do? They book him on the card. So what do they book him against? They book him against a tough guy. supposed to be able to beat him. And so my father went ahead and went in the ring on the first time, and he beat the guy, you know. Then he went the second time, third time, fourth time, and on down the road there, and finally they decided they better smarten him up. So they went ahead and smartened him up, and that was the story of my father, you know. It's amazing to me that the likeness or the of what the MMA is and what wrestling was back then. What the amazing thing is that, and believe me, I'm not saying anything bad about MMA or anything else, but they are a form of wrestling, and all of your MMA guys and everything used to be in our profession. All of the guys that were extremely rugged and tough and everything else. And I'm not saying that we're not still rugged and tough, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, guys used to want to get in wrestling, now they want to get in the UFC. Yeah.
That was us.
Well, we were talking on the phone last week, and I was mentioning, we've said that the UFC now is like the first 40 years of pro wrestling, but it's only taken UFC 10 because with the worldwide internet communication, we're on speed search now. It took wrestling about 40 years to really to get to the showbiz point with television, etc. UFC now is already starting to blur the lines. Brock's going back. UFC, to me, Dana White's the most successful wrestling promoter in the world today.
I agree with you 100%. I think that's so true, you know, and I think we're looking at the same thing repeating itself, and it's going to repeat itself again.
Except Gotch double-crossed Hackenschmidt. Next time it might be,
Gotch double-crossed.
it might be Brock double-crosses. Anyway, let's go back to your dad.
Yeah, but it was a tough. You know, I don't want to use he was a tough son of a gun.
We can say these things here because Sean Oliver just paid the FCC fine, and we'll be fine.
All right.
How did he pick Amarillo?
Well, he picked Amarillo because of Kel Farley. Kel Farley was an old-time wrestler. There was a guy that was a wrestler that was up in Ohio that was up there with my father, and I can't quite remember his name. But he was up there in Ohio, and my father was up in Ohio, just started into the business, had about a year under his belt, and we were living up there in a trailer, you know, a small trailer, house trailer, that he and my mother had bought. And he told my father, said, hey, he says, and up in Ohio was going to become heavyweights, which was above 205 pounds.
Yeah.
And my father thought, well, you know, hey, I need to go somewhere, but not up here where it's all heavyweights, you know. I want to get somewhere. And he asked, can't think of the guy's name right now, but he asked him, and he told my father, he says, well, down there in the panhandle of Texas, there's a guy by the name of Kel Farley, and he's got a place down there, and they got a business down there. And you go down there and get into the wrestling business. Kel Farley and Dory Denton. So my father went
Which
down
is ironic. The previous promoter in Amarillo was named Dory Denton. And how many Dorys do you know these days?
Not very many.
Not very many.
I know a brother.
And that was even before the days of Doc Sarpolis, right? He come along right afterwards, and then your dad took over from there. But.
Yeah, my father took over from Sarpolis whenever he passed away.
So when you got there, I guess 1948, Dory was what, like 7, and you were.
Oh, I was 4, and my brother was around 8 years old. And I was 4 whenever I got out to Boys Ranch, and I was an idiot.
Well, your dad worked at the Boys Ranch, which is kind of where Eddie Graham got the idea for the Florida Boys Ranches, right?
Well, that's exactly where he got the idea for the Boys Ranch, because he was he loved my father so much that he just idolized him and what he had done, and he followed everything that he did, and he took it down to Florida and tried to make a replica of it. Yeah. And he did make a replica of the Boys Ranch down there, and it's still there now, I assume. just as Cal Farley's Boys Ranch is in Amarillo. Still there, kids still there, everything. And my father brought wrestling to the Panhandle, amateur wrestling, and he started it at Boys Ranch. And they had some great teams come out of there, you know, and just did very well with it. The kids loved it, loved the sport.
But now he's not only running the Boys Ranch, he's also wrestling. You guys are starting to grow up, and the tales in your book, by the way, fine publication, More Than Hardcore by Dory Funk. Pick it up at your local bookshop. You mentioned that you had some of the great wrestlers in the world coming in, and you would sneak down and listen to your dad tell stories, and they would be cutting up. And who were some of the guys you listened to?
2 o'clock, you know? 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, they'd come back from, well, back then it would be Abilene and Odessa and all of those southern towns, and or Hereford whenever they get closer. And my mom would go ahead and she'd cook up those wonderful steaks and wonderful meals and everything at 12:30, 1:30 at night and everything, you know, and I'd come into there, and it was just wonderful. It was what a way to grow up, to listen to their stories, and especially, you know, whenever you're hearing stories about World War II and all of these different things that happened to them and everything, you know. It's just wonderful, and then their experiences in the business itself were so interesting too.
Who were some of the guys that you liked when you were a kid, the wrestlers that you either liked to watch or listen to, or both?
Well, we had a place in our garage, but you know, those guys would come by, but what it would always do, it always break down, you know. It would go ahead, and they'd be in the kitchen, you know, and talking, whether it was in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning, it didn't matter, you know. But if they'd all get in there, and I mean, you get those guys together,
move the furniture back,
get a few beers there, move that furniture back, and pretty soon there they go right to the floor, you know, and see who's the best, you know. That was it was amazing times for me and for my family.
How old were you when your dad smartened you up to the business?
You know, I was in the 7th grade.
So about
7th, 8th
12,
grade,
13,
12, 13,
like.
Yeah. He didn't want to insult either myself or my brother's intelligence. And he also taught us to respect the profession too at the same time, you know.
He waited till you were old enough where you wouldn't just tell the kids because, you know, you were little, but at the same time he didn't want you to
go off over there, yeah. And you know, but so many things happen though, is whenever, you know, I'll never forget is my father was a very tough man and lived a very tough life. He really did, you know, and he was as tough as there was in the whole Amarillo area, and he was one of the great of the very, very good shooters in the business. Because, you know, as he was going to Indiana University whenever he, like I said, as he 4-time state champion, he is going to Indiana University and wrestling at the Indiana University when he got drafted. So he was a great athlete, you know, and a great amateur whenever he, you know, so he really did protect his profession at that time, and people did protect it. You know, as I can remember to this day, that sitting in a restaurant in Amarillo, Texas, whenever I was probably 7, 8 years old, you know, and this guy came into the restaurant. My mom and father and a couple of their friends were in a booth in the back room, kind of in a room separate, not that far away from one another, in a restaurant, normal type of thing you have. And my brother and I were in the other one, and he recognized us. And he sat down by me and he says, why don't you tell me all of that wrestling is fake, isn't it? It's all a bunch of bullshit, you know. And my brother heard that. I said, I don't think it is. I said, I think it's real. And he said, well, you know, it's not real. It's all phony. It's all a bunch of crap and garbage. Well, my brother took off, told my father, and he came around the corner, and that was one of the first times I've ever seen anybody just beat the living shit out of somebody, and it was my father just beat his ass up right there in the restaurant, you know.
I've never understood the wisdom.
My father beat a lot of people up.
Regardless of whether, you know, guys Freddie Faker or not, when somebody that's that physically intimidating, you just walk up and say, "I think you're fake." Well, that's to me that's never been the path of wisdom. It's insulting.
It's insulting, but did we handle it right? Yes, he handled it right. And, have I handled it right at times? Yes, but it was my livelihood, yeah. And I have to protect my livelihood. You know?
Well, during the 50s, your dad, this was before.
And here I am sitting down here and talking to you and talking to the people out there, and it's really...
that horse has left the barn, though, Terry, a long time ago. We can't do anything about it as much as we'd like to.
I'd love to go out and rope him and bring him back. I would.
Your dad, before he ever owned the territory, he was a top baby face through the 50s. He was, you know, he was establishing his reputation.
Wrestled the real Gorgeous George. I got pictures of him on the wall.
That's what I was going to say. When you're watching your dad, and you're entering your teens there. I was
going to tell you. You know how many people they drew? I'm going to tell you what. You think wrestling is big in this day and age? We're going to talk about New York, drawing big crowds and everything else. You know, well. Back then, my father wrestled Gorgeous George in the football stadium in Amarillo, Texas. And with the football stadium held like 8,500 people. And the ringside held another 1,000. And there was like 62,000 people in the city. So you were drawing about 20% of the population. Yeah. Well, they don't draw that anymore to any type of sport.
If they did that in New York, it'd be 1.3 million people or whatever at this point.
Boy, you're quite a mathematician.
Well, I just come completely out of my ass with that.
It did. You just did it.
Just boom.
It's amazing.
You know. Of course, it's a completely bogus figure. I have no idea.
I'll bet it is not.
It'd be close. It'd be close.
I know it.
Well, who were the guys that you liked? Because I know when I was a teenager, and you were one of them, I've stolen things from you.
Hey, now, am I that old?
Well, no,
I am.
You know, yeah. But who were the guys you liked to watch that you stole something from when you got into business later on, either in the ring or as a promo or just body language?
I loved them all. Loved Johnny Valentine. I thought he was a great in-ring performer. He'd go into the ring and he was so solid and so wonderful in the ring that he would go into a territory. He really would back in, and all of the boys would look at him. You know, he could go into any territory, no matter how bad a shape it was in, and he could bring it up. And all the boys would watch him, and they would all start emulating him.
Yeah.
And it would just entirely rearrange the territory to where you have a territory that's not doing that well. I saw him do it to territory after territory after territory and just explode them by just being that solid and
change the style.
Change the style into believability and suspension of disbelief.
The reason I asked you who you might have taken stuff from.
And that's not the only, many others too.
Well,
Rapid Ricky Romero. Why did I love Rapid Ricky Romero? Because we go to all of those little towns where they pick cotton, you know, like Littlefield and Hereford, Texas, you know, and I'd go over there. I loved to be on the card with Ricky because there'd just be oodles and oodles of the Spanish population would come out to see him. And I would get on that card, I'd make more money.
There you go.
And then, but what else he'd do is he'd give me an education whenever I was driving down there and driving back. And that's what these guys don't get in this day and age, is we had the automobile, you know. And what was the automobile? Well, if you as a young wrestler, you got shoved into the back seat with a couple of other young wrestlers, And the old wrestlers would be up in the front with the seats shoved all the way back, going down the road lecturing you about what you did right and what you did wrong in your match and it was a great education and a wonderful way to travel and a wonderful way to live.
All you had to do was sit back and listen, and you would learn more in the car than you would sometimes in the ring.
Oh, absolutely.
And Ricky Romero was the biggest babyface in Amarillo, not named Funk. He was the father of the young bloods, Jay and Mark and Chris.
Great guys, but you know, then you got DiBiase's, and you got so many.
Mike, Teddy's father, at the time.
You know, you got a lot of guys. Then you got the guys that came out of the football, you know, out of West Texas football, Merced Solis, Dick Murdoch, who was amazing because Dick Murdoch was. You know, West Texas had some great football players, Dwayne Thomas, Mercury Morris, myself. No, I did play. I did play good ball.
Stan Hansen and Bobby Duncombe and West Texas State, but Murdoch was Murdoch was so good, he was so slick. He even convinced, he played in the alumni games for West Texas State,
right.
never went to West Texas State, but he convinced people after the fact he did.
He was so good. He convinced people at West Texas.
Yes.
And he actually went out there and never played a down of football at all. The God's honest truth went out there.
Until he got in the alumni game.
And played middle linebacker.
Yeah.
And did a hell of a job.
Because he could do anything.
Yeah, you know, as I saw him and John Ayers was my good friend too, another guy that actually wrestled in the business and refereed some. And John was a wonderful, wonderful football player for the San Francisco 49ers whenever they were winning Super Bowls year after year, you know. And Dick Murdoch, I saw him say, John, I want to race you across, you know, I'll run you a race, John. Well, where do you want to run, this and that? And they decided they're going to run across the football field, you know, not lengthwise, but 55 yards across. And John beat him by about 3 yards, but Murdoch stayed right up with him. I mean, it was just amazing. And Ayers ran, I don't know how fast he ran, but he was great and fast. But Dick Murdoch with that big beer belly and everything wasn't that far behind him that time.
It seemed like Dick's belly his arms and legs got smaller and his belly got bigger.
We were in Atlanta, Dick and I were, you know, and I went ahead and we was after Atlanta and been wrestling and everything else. And we both went out said, let's go have some beers. So we went out to this bar at this shop. It was a shopping mall, but it was an outside mall. You know what I mean? It was like not inside. Strip mall deals.
Yeah, where you go outside to go to different stores.
Well, you got the drug store and this store and that store and that everything else, you know. And then they had this bar in there, you know, and it always had a lot of people in there and everything else. So Murdoch and I decided we was going to go get a beer, you know. So we went up there, and whenever we went up there, it was next to this grocery store. Well, they had all of these carts out there, you know. It was that you have in the grocery store that you carry your groceries in. But then you take them outside, you know, and you put your groceries in your car and you leave them out there in the parking lot. So it was out there, and the bar was there, and we'd been in there for several hours. And I said to Dick, you know, I was going back out the car, and I got in the car, and I said, Dick, I said, you know, and there was one of those carts, you know, turned on the lights. And there was a cart right in front of the car, and I said, Dick, you know what would be really, really funny? He said, what's that? I said, if you would go ahead, and if you get in that cart, and I'll get behind you in the car, and I'll push you by the front of the bar. Ho, 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 Budrow, that'd be funny. That's what Murdoch said. You know, you bet, Budrow, that'd be funny. Yeah. So he went ahead and got in that damn thing. He got in that grocery cart, you know, and he was in there hanging out on every side. Ho, ho, you know. So I went in, so I got him going up there, you know. I got behind him, got him headed right straight towards that bar up there, you know, and I got him going about. But then all of a sudden I raced up the car and got him going about 25 or 30, and he's hollering, whoa, Budrow, whoa, Budrow, whoa, 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 slow it down, Budrow, you know, and I just slammed on the brakes and let that son of a gun go. He kept on going there. he didn't go through the front door or anything, but he had a good lesson that night.
His father was a wrestler too, Frankie Hill Murdoch, and
Frankie
probably
Hill
had tons of matches with your dad, and you guys
he did,
were what, at the Amarillo Sports Arena at 8, 9, 10 years old,
always,
out in the crowd, right?
Well, no, we'd go ahead and get up in the ring afterwards, you know. and I'd always go ahead and beat the crap out of him all the time. I could then, though, because I was 4 years older than him, see. He's just a little bitty shit.
When did TV wrestling come in Amarillo?
Oh, it was been there forever. You know, it's you never heard of Zales Jewelers and the Amazing Burl Bullock? Have you ever heard of Burl Bullock?
I've heard of Zales Jewelers, but I haven't heard of the Amazing Burl Bullock.
Bullock made gazillions of dollars. Zales Jewelers came out of Amarillo, Texas. He's the one that started it and masterminded Zales Jewelers, and how he was able to start into the jewelry business was that he sponsored the wrestling show back here. And on Thursday night they had a live show before the matches started at 8:30. Well, they'd start the live show at 7:30 on television because they didn't have the video capabilities of taping it at that time. Okay. So they go ahead and they'd come out there and they'd do the live show out there from the wrestling arena.
Who was it? Was it always the announcer Steve Stack, or was there an announcer before that?
You know, I couldn't. There was announcers before Steve, but Steve went way back there. Steve was a great announcer, very good.
So your dad, like I said, started in Texas in '48. Dory was a couple years ahead of you, so he started as a pro in what, 63, 62, 63?
62.
And then you came at 65, maybe you broke in?
65, 66.
What was it like when Dory had gotten a head start first, and now you're having to follow your dad's shoes and now Dory's? Was there a lot of extra pressure? Because the name Funk at that time, like Amarillo was still such a small town, and you guys were on TV, everybody knew you.
I really, really loved the wrestling world. I just loved it. I mean, I did. Whenever I was a kid, so I don't think it was pressure. I think I was elated because, like, whenever I was a little kid, you know, as most kids wanted to grow up to be whatever, you know, that they might want to be, you know, and I want, you know, cowboys or Indians or something like that, you know what I mean? And they play cowboys and Indians, and I was different. I wanted to be a wrestler. I never wanted to be anything but a wrestler. I never had any desire to do anything else other than that. You know, so whenever I was a little kid, I didn't, hell, I wanted to play wrestle or whatever it was, you know.
When your dad had a lot...
I was a whole lot tougher than what I was, too.
If you thought you were... I won't go there. Your dad had a lot of powerful friends in the business because he had already, by that point, broken in and trained some guys and helped some guys, and one of them was Eddie Graham, who early in his career worked down there as the original Rip Rogers, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and Eddie and my father, they loved each other. They really did, you know. But Eddie had this thing about him where he always wanted to go ahead and just kind of try my father and get the best of him because he knew that would be the epitome of everything, for him to go ahead and beat up my father, you know. But I mean, it never happened, you know. And I never forget one time we were in Florida, you know, and we were down there on, Eddie had his boat, you know, which was a huge boat at the time, and it was just a gorgeous, wonderful yacht, or if you want to call it that. It was 45-foot fishing boat, you know, and at that time, that was a monstrous fishing boat for somebody to own. You know, and he went ahead and was coming up. We were in Ruskin with my father's parents, which is a place small town outside of Tampa, but it was on the water, on the ocean, and it had a dock here and everything. And Eddie went ahead and brought us up here, and we got out of the boat, and we were all running up there to the place we were staying, and my brother ran up there, and my mom got out, and I got out and everything, and we came up there, and Eddie got out, and Mike Graham got out, and we were all going up there to where my grandfather's place was, and Eddie was this was Eddie, you know. He'd get to drinking, and he'd get a little goofy, you know. He had one eye that was kind of looking that way or something, you know, like that, you know, and he'd get these crazy ideas when he got to drinking, you know, and he just knew that he could go ahead and get the best of my dad, you know, this one time, you know, and so he went ahead and he kind of followed my father along there, and all of a sudden he went ahead and he just caught him with he blindsided him, big one, you know. And
just bam, right?
Bam, as hard as he could. And my father went ahead and he kind of went down to his knee, and then he got back up. I remember watching it, and then he beat the shit out of Eddie.
And they were friends, right?
Yeah, they were friends. And he did the same thing, and then Eddie one time in Amarillo. It's all crazy, you know. Eddie one time in Amarillo. They were in the dressing room, you know, and Eddie decided he was going to go ahead and do that with my father again in Amarillo, you know, and my father went ahead and took him down and got him underneath the dressing room table and beat the shit out of him then too, you know. But Eddie just never did learn, you know, that you can't, you know, it doesn't work.
Whenever we do one of these things, and anybody mentions Eddie Graham,
language.
Well, we're rating.
I loved Eddie Graham. So did my, you know, but you know who loved him? My daddy. Yeah. He loved him. He loved him, and I loved him.
Well, whenever anybody mentions Eddie, it's almost like the heavens open up and the light comes down and you hear the Hallelujah chorus, because he was a genius booker, and he drew some great promoter, drew so much money, taught Bill Watts and Dusty Rhodes how to book, groomed Jack Briscoe, blah, blah, blah.
Now, wait a minute. Now, let me tell you something about Dusty now. You know where Dusty came from?
Texas.
You know where all of those guys began?
Amarillo.
Thursday nights. They all went there from West Texas as football players. And they'd watch those matches every Thursday night. So,
well, that I've noticed that sometimes what you think, if you trace things back, what you think somebody invented, you can always take it back a little farther.
Now, I'm going to take it back further if I can claim credit.
Go ahead.
To Dusty Rhodes. No, I don't want to claim him.
Because he's an egg-sucking dog.
I know he is. I can't claim Dusty Rhodes.
I always loved the thing that you and Dory would do that nobody else that I've ever seen do at that time. The guy backs you up in the ropes, he's peppering you, and all of a sudden you grab him by the back of the head and you throw your leg in between his legs and you hop up on the top rope and you flip backwards and monkey flips the guy right over the top rope. Slicker than come on a gold tooth. And I always loved that move, but then all of a sudden...
I don't know about how slick that is.
Trust me, it's slick, boy. But then I saw an old piece of footage. Stop laughing.
You don't want to say that.
I saw an old piece of footage of the Graham brothers from the Capitol Wrestling Show in the early 60s, Eddie and Mike and Jerry Graham, and Eddie Graham does the same thing. And I said, well, wait a minute. Is that where the funk stole? And then I realized, but Eddie Graham was Rip Rogers in Amarillo, and I bet your dad invented that, did he not?
Well, I don't know if he invented it or not, but I know that Eddie Graham was in there years and years and years ago, you know. And it was too. I'm a wrestling nerd, folks. I love going back. This guy does, and he can go back on you.
So anyway, Dory breaks in.
Yeah.
Your dad. But when did your dad buy into the office finally?
Well,
it was not just a talent.
I would say it was probably 58.
So before you guys started,
maybe 60. Yeah. You know, because he bought into it, and then whenever Doc passed away, well, then it was just, it was just a matter of, I think he paid Lou Sarpolis some money for it, and but that was a valuable thing back then.
So
Very valuable.
What was the shape of the territory? What was it like when you guys broke in the early 60s, you and Dory? The schedule of the towns weekly, was the TV like? Who was booking? Things like that. What was the shape of it?
The shape of it was, at that time it was Albuquerque on Sunday, Monday was El Paso, Tuesday Odessa, Wednesday Lubbock, Thursday Amarillo, Friday spot show down to San Angelo, Saturday back you're up in Pueblo, Colorado or Hereford, Texas, one or the other. Sunday Albuquerque or Clovis, and back to Monday El Paso again, and you just keep on going forever. Yeah. It was a forever cycle.
What was that mileage loop
but it was wonderful.
per week? Because those are that Albuquerque's a heck of a trip, wasn't it?
Well, but it wasn't. It wasn't, because Albuquerque, it's not like here. It was a heck of a trip.
Oh yeah, geez.
That we took here today, which was from where to where.
We're in New Jersey, folks. You can almost smell it through your TV screen, but here 60 miles is 3 hours. There, 300 miles is 60 minutes.
Exactly. Well,
you roll a bowling ball from Amarillo to Lubbock, can't you?
On downhill.
Yeah,
that's downhill. That's right. But yeah, it's not any population between the towns.
Yeah.
So you just take off and go. I mean, Albuquerque's 280. So you get up and, you leave at 4 o'clock. Be there at 8. Seriously.
Now, there was an overnight trip, though, because you used to have to do an Albuquerque TV that was different from the Amarillo TV.
Yeah, we did.
Wasn't that an overnight thing?
Well, we'd take off in Amarillo and go to Albuquerque, but we'd get up in the morning, drive to Tucumcari, fill up with gas to Tucumcari, and drive on in to Albuquerque. And that was 280 miles, and you'd be there. You get up at about 8, and we had a 12 o'clock TV show over there.
Yeah.
And we make live TV for over there. That's the only one we did. And it was a phenomenal town. It was, we do 5,500 in there on a regular basis. Just bam, bam,
and that's not
bam.
Dollars, that's people, right?
That's people, yeah. And then we go to El Paso the next night, which is about 2-something from Albuquerque. And
was that Gory Guerrero's town back then?
Yeah.
Was he the local promoter? Chavo's dad, Eddie's, etc.
And we do, 3,000 people sometimes, and less than that too. I mean, I'm not trying to, but I'm talking the upper end there. I'm putting everything over. And then we work Odessa, and that was an oil town and everything, on a Tuesday. And then we go to Lubbock. And those were all wonderful towns. But here's the thing, is what's the difference between us and the other towns? Those towns, we'd have our boys on them, and we would, that we didn't have the big town. We didn't have any really big towns like New York or St. Louis or Dallas or Atlanta or California or up in Oregon or, I mean.
It was smaller markets, but it was steady and it was weekly, right?
Yes, but we had to definitely pay honestly in order to maintain the talent that we had, because we were a smaller territory and we had to compete with the bigger ones. And
you guys didn't get any publicity in the national magazines that were based out of New York, and
we got a lot of publicity.
Later on with the Texas death matches that came and the chain matches, etc. But as far as in terms of the bigger territories that were on bigger television in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, you were geographically isolated there. And the TVs didn't cross over, so I notice a lot of times guys in other territories that do an injury angle, a broken leg, they'd be out for 6 weeks, they'd be over in Amarillo. Nobody knew they were there because there was no internet.
That's true.
So it was a place where guys could go and stay busy.
But how, Corny, how did we get control of the entire national wrestling lines?
Well, that was due to your dad having trained or influenced almost everybody in it, and they would call him and ask him advice when they got stuck, right? When they were up shit creek, we need to call Dory.
That's right.
And later on it was called Eddie Graham, but Eddie Graham was calling Dory.
That's right.
That's the amazing part about this thing, I think, is that from that, once again, small market area, geographically isolated. It wasn't Madison Square Garden, it wasn't Chicago International Amphitheater, but one of the most powerful men in the NWA, and a guy who everybody asked for his advice and everybody wanted his input, was the boss, and his influence was felt in more ways than just the territory that he ran.
So, what happened?
Well, we're going to get to that in the next hour and however long. So that was, we talked about your dad's influence, some of the matches that he invented. The Texas Death Match was your dad's invention. And explain to the people who don't maybe understand, because you've seen Texas Death Match. New York did them. Texas Death Match is a no DQ match. It's one fall or whatever. The rules of a Texas Death Match, and also explain how they were promoted. Your dad got them over to the point where the people realized it might go 2 hours. That was the only match that was advertised on the card.
He did, he and Mike DiBiase did 4 hours and 10 minutes.
Good Lord.
They did 4 hours and 32 falls, I think it was, in one Texas Death Match, which was, and the people just went nuts about it. And then they went ahead and they cut it off at 2 in the morning because it was too late. What a finish.
Jesus Christ.
Isn't that a great finish?
And wasn't it, that was one of the things that did get on the magazine cover. He and Cyclone Negro, 42 falls, an hour and 44 minutes, and they both went to the hospital for 3 days because of blood loss. And, I mean, the people in Texas were not easy to fool. If it was some kind of ballet dance, they were going to fart at it, right?
It wasn't a ballet dance, let me tell you.
It was legitimate, and that established the Texas Death Match to the point where it wasn't done every week and it wasn't overdone. But when they booked
it was not done at all overdone.
And what'd you have? A standby match, and they didn't get in the ring. Sometimes the card would be the Texas Death Match.
That's one of the great deals. Was my father and Mike DiBiase went 4 hours and 10 minutes, and then they went ahead, and it was like 8 months later they brought the return back. And all they booked on the return was, there was an opening match with 2 guys, and then there was a Texas Death Match, and then there was a match in case it didn't expand that long.
Right.
And they had a standby match at the end there, and they went ahead, and that was like only 6 people got paid on the card. But I mean, wasn't that a brilliant thing to do?
Yeah.
You know, it was really a great way to do it, you know.
And what a way to get a gimmick over.
Yeah, what a wonderful way to do it.
Tell them the rules. You know the rules by heart, don't you?
Oh, no, I know you do, though. 30 seconds between the falls. Falls do not count. No stopping because of blood. No, what else?
No time limit, no disqualification, obviously.
No time limit, no disqualification.
And the match continues.
Falls can be taken anywhere in the arena.
And the match continues until one man can't answer the bell.
Yeah.
And
the match continues. After a fall, you have 30 seconds and a 10 count to get to your feet for the bell. And if you can't get to your feet, well, then it's over.
And didn't you do the finish? I know somebody did the finish somewhere. They probably stole it from you, but I thought it just neat in its simplicity. The babyface, the heel won because the heel had fallen on top of the babyface. And when the babyface got to his feet, the heel was still on his back and the heel was up first, even though he was still unconscious. Did you guys do that? Or?
I think that sounds like Jerry Lawler.
It might have been Lawler. It might have been Lawler. It probably was. I
probably was.
Hey, in your book, let's start. We talked about matches with Dick Murdoch, who you had a bunch with when you guys broke in, both in and out of the ring. But also a guy that was an influence on you early was Sputnik Monroe, who was another one of the characters. You guys had characters down there.
Oh, Sputnik Monroe was one of the first guys had my first match with him.
What was
amazing. Let me tell you what we did. I wrestled him. His second match, actually, as I had a warm-up match that nobody knew about. It was in Clovis, New Mexico, and it was myself and I'm trying to think of her name, but it's Kay Noble and Jack Kane against myself and a little bitty short girl that wrestled all the time. I can't remember what her name was. She's out of Kansas City.
We'll come up with it.
Yeah, we'll come up with it.
We'll put it in a graphic, folks.
But anyhow, that was my first match. But it was just to get me used to the crowd and and everything, just because it was a small town. But then I had 2 nights later a match in Amarillo, my first match there, you know. And it was against Sputnik Monroe, and that was my advertised first match. Was against Sputnik, and I was in the ring.
Who was completely insane.
Oh, he
in his own lovely way.
Yeah, and he'd go ahead and he's telling me in the ring here, you know, you're doing good, kid. Just lay there, kid. Stay down, kid. And just a little bit longer, kid. I was in a 10-minute match, you know, and now the minutes are running by, you know. So now it's about 6 or 7 minutes going by. And I've looked like I don't know, I looked pretty bad, you know. I wasn't doing a damn thing.
Yeah.
But just laying there like, stay there, kid, you're doing great.
Did you ever get back up?
Huh?
Did you ever get back up?
Oh, yeah, I sure did. You know when I got back up?
When you beat him?
No. When my old man came down there and he came down to the ring, and he hollered at me, God damn it, get up off your ass. Now.
You're making the family look bad, right?
Yeah, and boy, I fired up and went like a maniac for the last 2 minutes, you know. But that was a true story there about him and that.
You talked about Ricky Romero. There were some other guys that were, in those days, 60s, early 70s, Amarillo mainstays. Gordon Nelson. Great amateur wrestler.
Yeah, great guy, great wrestler. Forget who it was. It was Les Thornton. Gordon Nelson was out there at the ranch, and so was a bunch of other guys. And that's where my father passed away. And what it was is Les Thornton was there too. And he said that nobody can hold me down in the front face lock, you know. So my father got down on the, you know, so my father front face locked him, and on the, you know, they were in the kitchen, you know, and he got down on top of him and slapped the front face lock on him, and they went all over the kitchen, and Les Thornton couldn't get away, you know, and Father kind of choked him out, you know, and he went in and came back over there where I was and sat down by me and my brother, and he said, it wasn't bad for an old man, was it? I said, no, it wasn't. And then he walked out on the front porch, and my wife is out there, and my wife is smoking a cigarette on the front porch at the ranch, you know. And he says, go back in there and tell Terry that I think I'm having a heart attack. So my wife came in there and told me that, and I went out there and we got him to Canyon right quick, and it was a small town and a very small community at the time, and they had one doctor in town there, and he was a good doctor, but he wasn't, you know, he was a small town doctor. And he said, you need to roll with it, Dory, and we're going to get you to Amarillo. So they called an ambulance. It took about 30 minutes to get there, which is more time and more time.
Yeah.
And then so we got in the ambulance with him, and my brother was in the front seat and I was in the back with my dad. And he said, how much further we got to go, Terry? So we was about a mile and a half from the hospital in Amarillo, and I said, about a mile and a half, Dad. He says, I can't make it. He says, I'm going, just like that. And he is gone.
He was 53 at the time, was he not?
54.
54.
That's a young man.
My dad had his heart attack just like the week before his 54th birthday.
Did he pass?
Yeah. And it just, he wasn't shooting on the kitchen floor either. He was out in the woods at a bird watching trip. It's calm,
well, you know,
calm fall day, and suddenly,
I'm not so sure it was.
You never know.
You don't know what happened out there and what's going on. You know, seriously, I'm being very serious with you. I mean, there's, you know, it's pretty, it's devastating, you know.
Well, let's get back to the staff here, the roster. Where I was going with that was there was some great great wrestlers, but also there was some great characters, because also one guy that you knew well that spent a lot of time down there, Killer Carl Cox, and Ray Stevens, who was a character. Tell me a Cox story. That sounds wrong. Wait a minute. Tell me a story about Killer Carl Cox.
All right, Cox was nuts. Let's see. As I'm trying to think of one. I'm trying to think of one down in Odessa.
Because he influenced Murdoch a lot. Murdoch loved him and hero worshipped him, and took the brain buster and the straight right punch and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I tell you, Murdoch story there. Murdoch story. Benny Trudell's story. I'm going to tell the story of my father and Benny Trudell.
Okay.
You'll love this story. This is a good story. I picked out, just blew into my mind right there. Who's Benny Trudell? He was a wrestler from 100,000 years ago. He was a little French wrestler. He was Frenchman out of Canada, Canadian French, you know. And he says, you know, so my father, he thought my father, everything that my father did was funny, you know. So he was, they were going down the road, you know, and my father would go ahead, you know, and he'd honk at hitchhikers, you know, and the hitchhikers would go ahead, you know. He'd pull off the road for the hitchhikers, you know, and they'd come running up there, you know, and just as they get there, my father would drive off, you know. And Benny would say, oh, Dory, that is so funny, Dory, that is so funny. Please, Dory, oh, you are such a funny guy, you know. So my father, and he did it a few times along the road on certain parts. So he pulled up this one guy, though, you know, and he said to Benny, he says, Benny, you know what would be really funny is if you pull down your pants and stick your ass out the window at the guy. Oh, Dory, that would be funny. It would. I am going to do it, Dory. I will do it. So my father goes ahead and he pulls down there, you know, and Benny goes ahead and he sticks his ass out the window, you know, pulls down pants whenever the guy starts coming up there, you know. My father would run off, you know, drive ahead of him a little bit, make him run, drive ahead and make him run. And Benny always thought that was funny. Ho, 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 ho. So my father goes ahead this one time, he goes up there and says to Benny, he says, all right, now pull down your pants and stick your butt out the window at that guy just as he comes running up here. Okay, Dory. So he sticks his butt out the window, pulls down his pants, and he says, and the guy's running up here, and my father, and Benny says to my father, he says, okay, Dory, he is getting closer, Dory. Okay, Dory, it is time to go. Let's go, Dory. Let's go, Dory. My father just turned and he just grabbed him by the shoulders and held him in that window, you know, and the guy that was coming run up there and everything, he just started punching him with both of his fists.
In the ass.
In the ass. That isn't funny.
That is funny to me.
Was that funny to you guys?
They liked it. They're asleep. You wouldn't believe what time we're shooting this, folks.
I have no idea.
Cancer's fun, right?
Yeah, there you go. We're all slappy. Another guy that was a character, and I've talked to Stan Hansen for the series here, and he was talking about him as the promoter from Albuquerque, Mike London.
Oh yeah, Mike London.
Did he have? I've heard the rumor, and some of it was printed in this, once again, fine publication. Every once in a while, when you'd have a good house in Albuquerque, somehow the box office would be robbed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he'd have the box office robbed.
Did anybody ever witness this, or he'd come in just all scuffed up?
No, he'd just come in scuffed up and things like that. You know, that was Mike London. He'd do that. Oh, he wouldn't do it too often, though.
Just every once in a while.
Yeah, well, he was very smart about it, you know, about maybe once or twice a year,
yeah.
You know. He was...
You would have thought he would have hired extra security after the first 3 or 4 times. But
oh, yeah, but he didn't. He never did, so...
True or false? Now, I've always wondered, I never have asked you about this, but I've heard about it secondhand. Detroit, You and Dory go in, work a program with the Sheik and Abdullah, territory's on its ass, you get it up. They have the big house for the big blow-off match. Sheik's son, Captain Ed George, comes in, true or false?
You're not going to believe this. Daddy.
We've been robbed.
We've been robbed, Daddy. There's been a cat. No, this is what he said. This is the honest God truth. Daddy, we have had a catastrophe at the box office. We have had a catastrophe at the box. And that's the way he would say it. It was like it was written down
out for him.
and just written out. I'm sure it was, you know.
Yeah.
He practiced his lines, you know, before he came in. And Daddy, we had a catastrophe at the box office. That's what,
But Buddy Fuller opened up Springfield, Ohio, outside of Cincinnati for Jarrett one time, got the TV on up there, and Jarrett sent Dundee up to check the house out because he wasn't sure he was getting the right count. And Dundee called back and said, no, there had to be 1,000, 1,200 people there. And Buddy Fuller turned in a couple of grand, and he said, well, Jarrett, damn it, I think we forgot to watch the back door. So 700 people snuck in the back door. It was just, nobody noticed.
That's about it.
There's another story that was in your book, and I had never heard this before, but you knew a guy when you were younger named Billy Thornton, and you ran into him later on in life.
Absolutely.
But when you first knew him, he's your brother-in-law or
Billy Thornton?
By
Billy
marriage
Thornton. And what it was is I was never supposed to, Billy Thornton was a nutty kid. He was, because I would go to their house, and Jack Thornton was he was an assistant booker to my father and our brother-in-law, you know. But Jack Thornton would go ahead and Billy Thornton was his adopted child. And Jack Thornton, we would have booking meetings over there at their house.
Yeah. Jack
and Barbara Thornton's. And Billy Thornton was was their child. And I knew he was nuts, you know, and but one time I was over there, you know, and I had to go to the restroom, and we were doing a booking session over there in their house, and I went from the office in the house, which wasn't that big of a house at the time, to the bathroom. And as I was going to the bathroom, I went by Billy, and his name was, so Billy was in the bedroom, and he says, psst, psst, hey, Terry, look at this. And I looked over there, and he was whacking off the dog. That's right, whacking off the dog.
Now tell the people.
No, I'm telling you.
Okay.
That's the truth. He was whacking off the dog. He said, hey, Terry. I thought, damn, Billy. You know, hey, look at this. You know, but who do you think Billy was?
Nobody? Nobody?
Nobody knows who Billy was?
Last name?
Billy Bob Thornton.
The actor?
That was him.
Wow.
We're talking to the studio audience now, ladies and gentlemen. When you get in the movie business, you go out for the acting deal, and you were up for a part, and it was a Billy Bob Thornton movie.
I was up here for a Billy Bob Thornton movie. I was up here for a part. I said, well, who's making the movie? And they said, Billy Bob Thornton. I said, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. That's my
nephew-in-law, or the dog whacker.
The dog whacker, that's what I said. He's the dog whacker. He's the dog whacker. I didn't get that part. That was it. I didn't get the part at all.
There was another guy in the territory that there's a story about. I want to hear if you were there firsthand, or at least you were closer. I've heard it from a number of different sources. But he was the Abilene promoter, right? Don the Lawman Slatton?
Yeah, Don the Lawman Slatton.
Because he was a wrestler in that territory,
Yep,
but he also
yep.
had a bail bonds business, hence the Lawman.
That was Don the Lawman Slatton. Yep.
Was he really the NWA World Heavyweight Champion for about 5 minutes after he wrestled Harley Race one night in Abilene?
Oh yeah, he was, and he went ahead and.
How did it happen?
I can't remember. I don't even remember, but I can't remember what it was that he did, but he double crossed
Harley, right?
Yeah, and ran out of the ring with a belt. And then he said, "Oh, Harley, you know I wouldn't do that."
Did he think he was going to get away with it? Because the story I heard was Harley just walked back to the locker room and kicked the door open and slapped him around, took his belt back and carried it back out.
Yeah, that's what Harley did. Yeah, but
How did he think he was going to get away with that?
well, he did. He did get away with it.
Well,
he did because
for 5 minutes.
But he didn't. Harley really didn't slap him. What he did, Harley went back there and he cried the blues, saying, "Oh, Harley, you know that I would never do that to you. I would never do it to you, Harley. You know I wouldn't." And he begged his way out of it. That's the truth.
What about your friend, and he was made famous in the Beyond the Mat movie, Dennis Stamp?
Oh, Dennis is a nut.
He worked there forever, right?
I love him. I love Dennis. Yeah, Dennis has been around there forever. Still is. What is Dennis doing now? I don't know. he's a tree man. Yeah.
You've been like trimming, cutting trees and
yeah. You know, he
trees
became famous off of that one movie.
Yes, and
probably the most famous guy from that movie.
Got more bookings than he ever had when he was actually in the business.
Yeah, and he still get movie bookings off of it for to come and talk to this stuff and all of this stuff. Yeah, Dennis Stamp. Yeah.
Did you really leave Dick Murdoch in the trunk of the car all the way from Abilene to Odessa one time when he asked you for a ride?
I sure did. No, I told him to get back here because it was kayfabe.
Yeah, he was heel, you were babyface, right? So you couldn't be seen together.
Couldn't be seen together. So we left the arena like that. You know, I said, "Dick, get in the trunk," because we're out at the back of the arena because people will see us going out of here. And I locked him in the trunk of the car, and I drove him 160 miles from Abilene to Odessa, Texas, and he was in the trunk banging on it all the way.
I can hear him, "Funk, God damn it, let me out."
But I did put him in there with a half a case of beer.
Another guy that worked the territory in the 60s was one of the most famous and infamous guys in the history of the wrestling business,
Who's
Dr.
that?
Jerry Graham.
Oh, Lord, have mercy. He was a nut.
Tell me anything about Dr. Jerry. Tell the story about when he stole his mother's body.
Oh, that was a horrible thing. That was terrible.
Because he first of all, he had a drinking issue, and secondly, he did have mental problems. Even though he
definitely had mental problems, and he was
wrestling genius.
He was in Phoenix, Arizona, and down there, and he went to the hospital and was in the hospital, and his mother was in the hospital. She had passed away in the hospital.
He was distraught,
and he was distraught up there with her. So he picks her up. And he carries her down the stairs and to the elevator, and down the elevator, and then out to the front, and all the way out to the front.
And they're chasing him, right? Trying to get no, sir, don't do that.
Yeah, and then they go ahead and try to get him to put her down, and he wouldn't put her down because it was his mother, you know, and he was distraught over the whole thing, and he finally fought his way to the car, you know, but he just finally ran out of gas and everything, and he body slammed his mother on the hood of the car. That's terrible.
I can't stop thinking about that.
You know, only you would think something like that was funny.
It's in your book too. I've heard the story before, but it's in your book.
I didn't laugh at it.
But you didn't laugh at it. You just reported the facts as they existed.
And you actually laughed at it.
I can't stop. I'm into necrophilia, among my many other vices.
What is that?
It's that's
you feel her how?
That's people who like to feel the others.
Feel you.
Yeah, I feel you. Let's get on
that
something
was really
serious.
Corny.
Yeah,
was really
well,
corny.
It's
well, why wouldn't it be corny?
Exactly.
That's right.
Here's another true or false for you. While we're telling stories.
Okay.
Explain the origin of the Briscoe Funk family heat stems from the fact that Dory had been scheduled to drop the NWA title at one point to Jack Briscoe, but he had a pickup truck accident on the ranch in Amarillo and
legitimate accident.
Jack didn't see it that way at one point.
He never has. He never did. He never did see it. Neither did Gerald. Both of them did it. Well, not Jack. Jack passed away, but Gerald. And what a great guy, and what a great performer into the ring, and what a great amateur athlete, and just what a great person. I love Jack Briscoe, and he passed away, and Gerald is, to this day they thought that we had done something to him, but that's really the truth about my brother's injury.
Dory Funk Jr. and Jack Briscoe's NWA.
Who are you? Are you going to be, what's his name from England? What the hell is the guy's name? Sherlock Holmes? Or something?
Well, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this because inquiring minds want to know.
Acting like Sherlock Holmes or
but
something.
No, the Briscoe Funk match.
I'm getting ready to get.
Don't stand up. I'll have to run. But the Briscoe Funk match for the world title for 4 years was the match in the NWA. It was the gold standard. It was the Flair Steamboat of its day. Do you think was it Eddie Graham that was upset maybe and got in Jack's ear? Did Jack come up with this on his own? The thought that he was somehow getting pushed back, he got it eventually. Where do you think it came from that he wouldn't have believed it?
Well, they just thought that the Funks were trying to hang on to the belt for a matter of more time.
Did it in the long run? Did it probably help your guys because your guys' angle and because the Briscoe Funk tag match was just as big around the country as the Briscoe Funk title match?
Yeah.
That little extra kind of ribbon on the square, little real emotion, did that help the proceedings? Because people believed you guys hated each other.
Well,
plus Texas, Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, they do hate us.
but in a loving way.
Jack and Gerald do hate us. No, Jack was a great guy, and so was Gerald. Both of them great athletes too.
It brought out the best in all
both
of you
of
guys.
us, yeah.
In all of you guys.
And I think it helped. It certainly helped. It didn't hurt a damn thing, did it?
Didn't hurt anything.
No.
Everybody still got there.
Yeah, that was it. Everybody still got there. That's what it was.
How did your father get involved with when Baba formed All Japan, and your father was the first guy to be able to supply him with American talent? How did that relationship come about to the point where Baba had sent Jumbo down to train in West Head, some of the other young Japanese boys, and he and then later on you guys continued booking the top American stars from the NWA over to Japan. How did the whole thing get started?
Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was because we were so strong in the National Wrestling Alliance. Very, very powerful then. And we were the controlling family of the alliance at the time. And Baba wanted to be with us because we had that power at that time. And he actually came to our ranch, to my house, not to our ranch, but to my house outside of Amarillo, which was on about 20 acres, but that had nothing to do with anything other than 20 acres. But Baba came in, and hush. So Baba came. He came to the ranch, and we talked to him, and he brought my father over there. My father still thought he was in World War II because he hated all of the fans. He hated everybody in Japan. Because, see, he went up on the beaches over there.
Yeah, he had been there, right?
He hated everything about them. He hated every Jap there was. and he thought they were dirty Japs and everything, you know, and he never ceased battling them, you know.
If he had lived to seen you be the most popular American to work in Japan, he would have freaked, would he not?
I think he would have, but I think he would have been, you know, but he and Baba did become friends, but the Japanese people could feel that with him over there, because he'd go over there with Junior and I, you know, and he'd walk around the ring with us and manage us, you know, somewhat manage, you know.
Yeah.
But they'd throw every damn kind of thing you could think of at him, you know, and everything and he'd throw it back at them, you know, and he had an automatic war with all Japanese people.
I looked back at a lot of the records, and I see either Dory defending the world title, he had it from 69 to 73, and you and your dad in a tag team match in it might be Atlanta, or it might be Florida, or it might be in California. You guys were everywhere. Who was minding the store back in Amarillo? Who was running the business day to day while you guys were on the road?
Always somebody. Always is had Herman there. My
your uncle, Dad's brother,
Uncle Herman. Yeah, and he was good, but we were there most of the time. We would space it. One of us was always there.
Okay.
My father was always back at home minding the business, or I was, or later on Junior was, you know. So we pretty much handled it. And then my father's brother was there too.
You guys were in demand though from the time you had been in the business, what, 2-3 years, you were starting to fly around the country. And
yeah,
it pretty much any NWA territory, you know, you guys went in at least a few times a year.
Yeah, we went to almost we were on the road a lot. And not only myself, but not only my brother, but me. And over the period that he'd had the belt, you know, and just, it made for a real good storyline. It really did. I'd go in there and be the cleanup man that's going to go ahead and wipe out all of the guys that were in line for a championship match.
The wrestling magazine headline, "I'm my brother's policeman."
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
it worked, and it worked well.
The Sheik would come into Amarillo every once in a while, work with your dad, right? Which once again had to be another. It was kind of a foreshadowing, because you and Dory had the long run against Sheik and Abby in Japan. But when you were just starting out, just breaking in, you're still a teenager. What did you think of the Sheik? Because he was different. He was definitely nuts. You know, he was crazy.
He was nuts. I was scared to death of him.
Everybody was scared of the Sheik.
Yeah, absolutely. I was always scared to death of him. Didn't matter when it was, or how many years.
When you were working with him, you were scared of him, right?
The last time I worked with him, I was running from him. Still running from him if I saw him. That's the truth. He was a scary, scary man, wasn't he?
I ran from you too. I ran from a stiff breeze, but what was it about? It was in something in the water in Texas. Over in the Dallas side, you had Fritz, and he had his sons. The family it was a family business. Over in Amarillo, Dory had you guys. It was a family business. Down in San Antonio, you had Joe Blanchard. His son Tully became a family business.
What about the Guerreros?
Well, I was about to say, over in El Paso, there you've got Gory, and he had Mondo and Hector and Chavo and who am I leaving? And Eddie finally, and then Chavo Jr. What is it about Texas? Every corner of the state had a family wrestling empire. You know, what was the difference between you guys, your operation and your modus operandi and the Von Erichs? I can think of several thousand differences, but give me a couple.
You know, they ran a very good business. It's just that I don't know. You know, you got to go ahead and you got to get into families and things, and you know, I mean, if you start that, I don't know. They were in a very populated area.
Yeah.
Much more population we had, you know, and they did great business down there too, you know, and Fritz was a great in-ring performer, and the kids were too. They really were, and then they just kind of exploded and self-destructed. And you know, I hate to say this happened or that happened, or how do I know, or how do you know? We don't really know what the circumstances were.
The boys came along after you guys did, but was there ever any thought, I don't remember ever seeing any Dory Funk Sr. Fritz Von Erich showdown when he was the toughest guy on one side of the state and Dory was the toughest guy on the other side of the state. Was there ever any thought about meeting in the middle and trying to put together some kind of interpromotional thing? Or?
Oh, they did. Fritz had come up here to Amarillo.
Would he?
And my father was very instrumental in helping him get that territory down there.
Okay, because Ed
we
McLemore and
yeah,
those guys, the original
yeah,
Sportatorium promoters,
yeah,
were starting
that was it.
pass by the wayside. But
passed by the wayside. Fritz got a hold of it, and my father was very instrumental in helping him out at that time.
After Dory had his run with the NWA title, finally went eventually to Harley, then to Jack. And then Jack, like everybody else, everybody melted down with that schedule. Because, I mean, it was the biggest money spot in wrewrestling pretty much at that time. But it was, the schedule was insane.
Yeah, the same way with me as I did the same thing.
When you were up for it, half of the promoters wanted you and half wanted Harley. And Fritz ended up being the tiebreaker. And
that's right.
Fritz picked you.
That's right.
Did you thank him, or later on did you curse him for that? Once you got
well, you know, couldn't help but from thanking him, because it was the best position in wrestling at the time, the very best, and it was the guy that had that title was making the most money of any of the wrestlers in the country.
You had it about 14 months, December '75 to February '77.
Yeah. And that's
approximately what did you make in that time period in 1975 and '76? That kind of money.
It was a long time ago. I made. I probably made over $500,000. Jesus Christ. That's a lot of money then.
That's a lot of money today.
Yeah.
It's more money than Sean Oliver's paying me here, folks. I'll just tell you. No, I kid.
But you know.
But you had to get out of it because you were. Everybody would either get burnt or they'd have problems at home. You were never home. Your body would break down.
I was never at home, and at the time, see that I had that belt. I don't know if you know this or not. But my wife and I were separated while we were divorced at the time. You know, and then we got back together, and whenever we got back together, that's whenever I decided to escape.
Were the NWA, were they like with you like they were with a lot of guys? Oh, just hang on, because they didn't want to go through the whole process again, or they say, okay, were they easy to?
Well, and see, but what you had back then, though, is you had guys that wanted that belt, and of course they wanted that belt, you know, and you had, you know, I mean, Harley, he certainly wanted the belt, and there was there was a lot of guys. Flair, did he want the belt?
I think Flair's the only guy who ever didn't ask. Please take. Even Thez at one point finally said, "Take it. I can't take it anymore."
Yeah.
Flair's the only one that never said, "Take it." He'll keep it forever.
Yeah, he'd keep it forever. He'd still be wearing
it. After your dad died, that meant there was one less of you that was able to take care of the business in Amarillo, and you guys were still, once again, you guys were still on top in so many different places. What at that point, how was business doing in the territory? Because it was, your dad's death made magazine covers and front page news in the newspapers, but it didn't hurt the wrestling business.
No, business was great, you know, but I mean, it didn't, you know, and it's amazing that business was as good as it was in Amarillo.
Who were the guys you relied on when you were not able to both be on the cards to draw the money and carry the cards?
Well, absolutely, you could rely on Ricky Romero. You could rely on him in all of your Spanish towns, and that was El Paso, Odessa, in the summertime. You know, Lubbock, and all of your small towns around Amarillo that would draw so well in the summer whenever they had the, you know, cotton gins and stuff going. That was a great area then. You know.
Did you bring in bookers, or everybody did it in a house? or did you bring in anybody from outside at that point?
We never had a booker in Amarillo, Texas. We
Really?
always booked it ourselves. Always did everything ourselves, and the television was, you know, we did everything from the TV, everything from every week after week.
When you dropped that belt to Harley on February 6, 1977 in Toronto, and I remember that was the first time I'd seen an NWA World title change on television.
Yeah.
Because they taped the match, and this was when videotape was new for wrestling at that point, and sent it to all the, every NWA territory carried it on their television show, and I was just struck by, I had not had a chance to see you in person at that point, and was just about to see Harley in person, but it just, y'all's work was a level above to me. It was just cleaner, it was crisper, it looked better, and that match, at least the part that they showed, to me would still hold up today. It was a heck of a deal. It was an easy finish, the old Indian deathlock thing. You had bad knees that, you know, people recognized.
That was it.
Made people believe it, but after that,
that's it.
Happened. What was it like working with Harley in those days? Because I would love to see video of him in the 60s.
He'd wear himself out.
He was so good in the 70s, and he'd already had injuries, and he was getting a little bit older. In the 60s, he was a bumping machine. I've seen the pictures, but I never.
Yeah, bumping machine. That's a good name for him.
Everything was a little higher, a little harder, had a little more emphasis to it.
That was it, and that was his punches, his everything. You know, he gave a great deal in every match. He gave too much. Or else he wouldn't be in the shape that he is now. Physically, and he'll tell you that too.
Oh, we were on a show with him in Greensboro one time, and he was kind of rubbing his knee. I said, "Harley's your knee bothering?" He said, "Feel that." And it felt like I was squeezing a beanbag. His kneecap was just pieces.
Yeah.
And he went out and had a main event match that night.
Oh yeah, and did the same thing and did it again, you know, and that's just the way Harley was, you know, and again, you know, that was that commitment from these guys. There was, you know, I would like to be and like to think that I gave that kind of I committed myself that much to my profession. And I hope that I did it on occasions. I know I did. And we all know we have had nights that we've done better than other nights.
Sometimes the cake doesn't quite rise.
But you know, I mean, I always wanted to be known as that guy, you know, like Harley. That, but, you know, and but Harley paid a tremendous sacrifice. He sacrificed a lot. He sacrificed his hips, he sacrificed his back. I've never seen a guy that used to go ahead, and those rings were hard back in, that would go ahead and come off that top rope as high as he would come off, and, you know, do that belly splash onto the ring apron or floor.
He'd take backdrops on the concrete.
Backdrops on the concrete, everything. Harley, he gave himself, he gave his body to the people. He did, seriously, you know, and there's not many guys
you know a little
like
bit
that.
something about that yourself, and
well, I think that, you know, and I can always remember too is my father telling me and Harley both, you know, whenever we was working around Amarillo every night, you know, and you know, the territory, and he'd tell us, "You two guys don't do all that goofy crap. You're gonna regret it someday," you know. And he was right. He was right to an extent.
When did you start regretting it? Last week? I haven't seen you pull back on anything.
Well, I think you have. I just don't think you've been. You see as well as you
do the same things, it just maybe a little bit slower than you used to.
Maybe slower and lower.
You and Dory as a team, and then later on you
I
just
loved
as a
working
single.
with my brother as a team.
In that mid-late 70s period, that's when you really got heated up in Japan as baby faces, because they started to you went there so often, you became almost like a native. They couldn't deny the effort and the talent you put in. And how did it go from your dad hating him and them throwing things at him and him being in your ass corner to all of a sudden they love you so much they're throwing the streamers and they're pulling you off the ring apron to hug you when you're trying to get in the ring? How did that transition happen in that decade?
I think it was just a common love, compassion that developed over a period of time for us, for the people, and them for us. I mean, just by, you know, I mean, it really did. I mean, they were just great people, and I love them to this day. And I get cards every week from Japanese people and write them back, you know. And
I used to love the caricatures that they would do in the magazines and the newspapers of you with the big grin and the hair and the cowboy hat, and there'd be Dory with that one squiggly hair on his head, and the Funk family, and it just, I mean, you guys were everywhere. You were on newsstands and the covers of magazines and newspapers, and you couldn't get away from Funkamania in Japan for a while.
Yeah, well, it was for a long time. It was for a long time there, and it was a great run. Had some great runs in this business, you know. Japan was one of them. It was about a 15-year run, you know.
It was, I guess, what we did if you haven't seen it already, as Nick Goulas would say, you will see the Back to the Territories on Georgia Championship Wrestling. It was around about 77 that TBS, or TCG 17 in Atlanta, started being broadcast to the cable systems. And all of a sudden, the country wasn't so, you know, isolated anymore.
Yeah.
Even Amarillo, you were one of the first people it's been recognized to see, well, cable TV, here's what it's going to do to our business. And you guys were running the territory down there. You'd had no outside TV and interfering, and you could bring talent in and use them the way you wanted because they were clean slates. And all of a sudden, you've got a cable TV show from Atlanta being beamed into your territory along with everybody else's. Did you know that eventually the jig was going to be up right off the bat?
I knew the jig was up whenever I went to Tucumcari, New Mexico. And I think it was myself, and I'm trying to figure out who else it was, but a couple of the other guys that were riding with me, you know. And we go to Tucumcari, we go to Albuquerque, but we stop in Tucumcari for breakfast. So we stopped in there for breakfast, and it was me and I'm trying to think of what the guys, it was me and, it was, who was the guy that was over so well then? Tommy Rich.
Tommy Rich.
So Tommy.
Wildfire. Somebody said something about firing up.
Yeah, that's right. Tommy Wildfire Rich was in the car with us, and he just came in for that week.
Yeah.
And he was in Albuquerque, but we drove from Amarillo to Albuquerque, but we stopped in Tucumcari. So we were going to go ahead and eat at this little restaurant that we ate there every week. So we stopped there, and along came this carload of high school girls. I don't know where they came from, but they were all screaming, hollering, going crazy, everything whenever we got out of the car there. And I thought, oh my gosh,
there we go, yeah.
I'm really looking good, you know. They ran right by me and right up to Tommy Rich. And I knew then that TV was going to make a big difference in the world of wrestling. And it sure did too, and that's a true story. And it really did. And Tommy Rich was probably just huge all over the entire United States.
But you guys had been there in that territory and went through that same town every week for the previous 15 years, and all of a sudden,
this
guy's never been here before, but we've seen him on TV.
On national TV. And it was the only national TV at that time. And that's what really made that different. And they could go anywhere. And, you know, Jim Barnett was, you know, he was a very generous guy. Because he could have done that. He wasn't an idiot. But what did Jim do? He would go ahead and he would put these people out, and you'd say, well, hey, I want to book Tommy Rich. Well, okay, you can have him. Jim had no desire to do what Vince did later. which was take over the entire country. But he was, Jim Barnett could have taken over the entire country at that time.
He wanted to take back over Michigan and Ohio and West Virginia because the Sheik and Bruiser had stolen it from him 15 years beforehand. He just wanted to get it back since they weren't using it anymore. Tell me a Jim Barnett. Tell me any kind of Jim Barnett story. My boy.
My boy.
My boy.
My boy.
Jimsy.
I remember Jimsy.
Oh, look at my beautiful stars.
Jimsy was crazy. Terry, my boy.
You have to tell me you messed with Jim Barnett at some point. You had to rib him.
Well, I'm
or
trying
mess
to
with
think
him
of
in
one of
some
them.
kind of way.
I did some strange stuff to him.
Well, now don't say it like that.
No, I'm not going to say it like that.
Is this going to be released? I don't even know at this point.
No. We went to, where did we go? I was coming from St. Louis one time. And where was I? I was supposed to be in Atlanta the next day, you know. And I wound up going ahead. I flew from St. Louis, but I'd been out to the Gaslight Square there in St. Louis, you know, and drank about 6 beers and got a about 16. And it was, went out to the airport to catch a red eye out about 1 in the morning it was, you know, those late flights to Atlanta, you know, and I went ahead and got into the plane, you know, and I was drunk from a little bit earlier that night, and they went ahead and took off, you know, and so they just went ahead and, what the hell did they overfly? They overflew something, but I wound up in Florida.
That's right, because you went to sleep and forgot to get off at your stop, and they didn't.
I was drunk.
Didn't forget.
I was asleep.
They were asleep.
That's right.
But and so they didn't. And you ended up at the end of the line.
That was 100 years ago.
That doesn't have anything to do with Jim Barnett, though. Did you deal with Jim Barnett when you were champion? Was he booking the champion still at that point?
What was the guy's name before Jim Barnett that was there?
Sam Muchnick.
No, but the one guy. Who was the guy? My gosh. He got on the plane. What was his name, Cornette? Tell me.
I don't know. I wasn't on the plane with you.
He got on the plane, and we got off the plane, and he was on the plane, and I went ahead and I caught him coming off the plane, and he had gone ahead and put a videotape in Odessa, Texas.
Oh, I remember that story. Pedro Martinez.
Pedro Martinez. That's
yes.
Right. Yeah.
And you said, "You son of a bitch."
Him, yeah, you son of a bitch, and I went ahead and said, "Don't you ever put a wrestling tape into the Amarillo territory, you son of a bitch. I'll break your leg," you know.
Yeah.
So he ran away, you know, and I thought, boy, that was real good, you know. Dusty was there. I said, "Did you see that, Dusty?" Yeah, I thought that.
But what happened later on?
So we went ahead and went walking out of there, you know, and they had security by the doors, and they went ahead and they was waiting for me at the security up there, and they said, you know, and what Pedro Martinez did is he tore his shirt, tore everything up, and went up there and said that I had whipped him, you know, beat him up. So he went ahead and told all of those policemen up there that, and they grabbed me, they said, "Are you Terry Funk?" I said, "Yes, sir." And they said, "Well, come with us." And they went ahead and they took me to the jailhouse, put me in jail for a day or two.
And he filed a lawsuit also, did it, with a picture
$18 million, and he had a picture of, what was it? It was something, you remember that.
He found a picture of somebody's ruptured testicle and told him you kicked him in the balls, tried to pass off a fake ball picture, ladies and gentlemen.
He had a hydrocell that was that big around. That's what he did. He had a hydrocell is what it's called. Hydrocell. He had
why do you know that?
Because he had the goddamn picture right up in front of me there.
No, I mean, why do you know he had what it's called though?
Because that was a nice name to call it. That is better than
ruptured ball.
That is not a ruptured ball. That's not the right way to say it. It's a hydrocell, is what that is.
Well, it wasn't his damn ball anyway.
It wasn't.
He took somebody else's ball and tried to go home with it.
He took the picture. He had a picture of somebody else's ball.
I wonder, ladies and gentlemen, how he was able to produce
how
that.
How can I even have, I've got such a stupid life. Nobody's had that crap done to them. Nobody's had that stuff done to them, have they? I'm just an idiot. Oh, man.
Amarillo.
What did I do? What did I do?
I don't know why I'm even looking at it, but Amarillo was a heat territory. It was like Puerto Rico. You worked there a lot. It was like southeastern out of Knoxville. When you worked for the Fullers, you go up in eastern Kentucky. Yeah. They liked having heat on the heels because the people liked being mad, and then they liked seeing the baby faces make them happy. And true or false, after you did that deal in East Tennessee with that promo on the Fullers and everything, they had 17 guns they pulled off of the fans going into Hazard, Kentucky.
True.
Coming to see you.
True, that's right.
Use them on you.
Coming to see me, yeah.
Did that ever make you nervous at all?
Well, it sure did whenever I left the building, because there was about 2 or 3 cars behind me with their bright lights on, and they had guns hanging out the window. That's no lie.
That would tend to make
they had
nervous.
No, they had guns out the window and everything. You know, they was running around there and aiming them at me. And all this.
How did you get by with I've seen you do it. I don't know how anybody else could get away with it. Back in the days when grown men would believe what was going on and fight the guys, you would walk up and get right in nose to nose in their face and tell them what you thought of them. And they wouldn't touch you most of the time, but you would back them down. I've seen you do it. And was it the look in your eye, just the way you were able to make them convinced that you were crazy as a rainbow trout in a car wash?
Because I am crazy as a rainbow trout in a car wash. And I don't know how crazy that is.
What's some of your better riot stories?
Oh, I don't know. The one out there, I was out of Tennessee, and they went ahead and followed me out of town, and had the guns out and all of that stuff, and poking them, you know, out their windows and going to shoot me and all of that. My wife was with me, and she tried to put her head in the glove compartment, you know, trying to get away from those.
Do you remember?
I would just idiotic stuff like that, you know, fools.
How often did you have in West Texas? You had to have some people hitting the ring fairly regularly.
Well, I had them pretty regular in a lot of places. San Antonio.
Of course, you were babyface out there, but I mean, fans on the show
San
for the heels.
San Antonio in South Texas, it was pretty. You know, knives were a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
A lot of knives. I got a lot of knives left. I got about 6 of them in a drawer. I had one of them stuck in my leg. Looked down there, and there was a knife in my leg, you know. I had one of them.
You're like, well, how did that get here?
I had one of them stuck in my neck. I got a scar here somewhere that I. But anyhow, it's about. But
didn't you used to put them up on your office wall? You had a little selection of them.
This one guy threw it. You know, I was down there in San Antonio, and he threw the knife, and it stuck right in my neck. You know, and it had one broken blade on it. The big one was broken, and it had a little blade on it. It was about that long, and it was just stuck right in my neck. So I went ahead, you know, I felt something hit me whenever I was going back to the dressing room, you know, and so I went ahead and thought, damn, what in the hell is that? You know, and I reached up there and felt around. I thought, what in the world could that be, you know? So then I went ahead and went in the dressing room and looked, and it was a knife that was just stuck in there with a blade inside my neck.
Fairly close to your carotid artery.
Very close,
right over there.
Very close, very close. I said, you know, but when I said, you think, you know, I don't know, I was out there and I turned around to those people, I said, looky there, I said, that's tough, you idiots, you know. I said,
well,
you
had
a lot
a trick.
Better language than that.
You had a trick that and you used it on me one time, even though I wasn't trying to attack you. You were trying to attack me. But I remember you telling me the reason you developed that is because when you pantsed a guy, if a fan hit the ring, you could you'd grab his pockets, the old dress pants away, and it wasn't jeans in those days a lot of times. It'd boom, and the guy'd be standing there in his underwear, and then he didn't want to fight anymore because he's standing there in front of 5,000 people with no pants on, and off you go.
That's what I did to Cornette.
On live Memphis television, and I didn't know it was coming, and he did not bother to ask whether I was wearing underwear or free balling, and Lawler booked me in that match as a rib. I was managing Jesse Barr, and Jesse Barr thought they were trying to run him out of the territory because it was Jesse Barr and 2 masked job guys against you and Lawler and Coco Ware when we show up on TV one day. You had, after your long rivalry with Lawler, it was a Super Bowl Sunday, '83, and
you were hard to
put together. And well, no, I saw you. I was used to running from you when I was a photographer, and you did the promo on Jimmy Hart. I hate a sissy, and then I come out and Jesse thinks, well, they're jobbing me out, and I'm just happy to be on TV. And Lance, I think I see a sissy. I'm like, oh shit, this can't end well. And out of the studio, and you beat up the job guys. You hit Jesse with a chair, and as I snuck back in, you beat him, and then here we go. And you're around the ring with me, and I'm thinking, well, I'm staying ahead. And there's Coco blocking me off. You can see the sheer panic on my face. Well, there's Coco, there's you. I try to dive in the ring. Jesse's got my arms, and you both hands in the pockets, and here came the pants. And that was the only pair of pants I had. I had to go back and find duct tape and tape the pants back around my legs so I could come back out and do the show closing interview. And I screamed, fuck! The people at the TV station thought I'd said, fuck! And they almost kicked me off the air. You nearly ended my career before it started, Terry. But it was all a rib. Lawler put me in that match just so you could do that, right?
It might have been a blessing.
But that's true. I should be thinking. But he knew that this is going to be entertainment for the locker room, if nothing else, because I idolized you. Oh my God! All right. So anyway, you saw the writing on the mat, so to speak, when cable TV was coming in, and you, Dory,
absolutely.
You decided to sell the territory. It was still doing well, but you guys were traveling a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
You wanted to get out while the getting was good, and the pigeons, I mean the purchasers, were Blackjack Mulligan and Dick Murdoch, right?
Yeah. Did you know how much we sold that to him for?
I'll let you tell.
Well, because
I read your book.
$20,000.
Which was a
pittance.
A pittance, a drop in the bucket, a mere bag of shells.
Yeah, and that was for 20, and then, and that was what we sold it to him for, and then we just.
Was it just because you knew they probably couldn't afford anymore, and you were just
exactly,
let's do it?
Exactly, because they wanted to buy it.
Yeah.
So we said $20,000, and I think they put $5,000 down a piece, and then it didn't make it. Yeah. Which I wanted it to make it, they wanted it to make it, but it was a rough time to go into the business.
I don't know about Blackjack. I didn't get to spend a lot of time around him, but I can't see Dick Murdoch running a business. I just don't see Murdoch as the guy running. I see him working main event, drawing money, but I don't see him running the business.
How about having
unless it was brewery?
How about a chicken farm?
Well, unless they were some drunken chickens, I remember when Murdoch called me.
I feel sorry for the hens.
He called me in Knoxville. He said, Corny, I'm living in Colorado. I've got a job with Coors. I said, what do you do? And he said, I go around and drink Coors and talk people into drinking it with me.
That's what he did. That's what he did.
Fuck, Dick. It was perfect.
That's what he did. That's what he did. He actually did that.
He was the spokesman, right?
Yeah, and they were paying him tremendous money.
To drink beer and have other people drink it with him.
And then you know what he did?
He fucked it up.
Oh, he did. He did. What did he do? He did something with his car. I don't know. I can't remember. He got he got a free paint job on the damn thing from Coors. He took it up to Coors and said, paint this, because they had they had the trucks and everything else, So they painted his car for him for nothing, and then Murdoch would go around to the bars and drink, 17 cases of beer and give everybody a free one. What an amazing character.
He came in for me at Smoky Mountain right after you did one time, and it was wintertime. And he sent me a promo from Colorado. He said, "What?" He called me, he said, when you get the promo, watch it, tell me what you think. He's sitting out on his porch in shorts and flip-flops, no shirt, drinking a beer, cutting a promo on Bob Armstrong. There's a foot of snow on the ground, and it's snowing as he's talking, and he's outside. And 4 minutes, and there was something wrong with Dick, but he was a lovely man.
He was great. He was great. He was nuts. He was totally nuts.
And you weren't really,
well, look who he
you
ran
weren't
with.
balanced either.
Well, look who he ran with Dusty, him and Dusty.
He told me one time in Chicago, we were complaining about we got in late and had to check in this cheap hotel. He said, I slept like a ball of shit or what, I don't know what, it's late, I'm slappy. But he said, I remember one night me and Rhodes, we stayed in a hotel. I woke up the next morning and I had 6 inches of snow on my chest. He got drunk and was hanging his head out the window and went to sleep that way. It wasn't the room's fault. He was halfway in, halfway out of it. But you had just done, this was the month after you did your first moonsault against Bob Armstrong in Knoxville.
Yeah, that was quite a day.
And why did you do that? Because nobody knew you were going to do that.
I don't think that anybody was doing moonsaults then.
I'd say like Muda. That's where you got it from, probably. But remember what you piled all the chairs up and put Bob on top of it.
I want to get it. Yeah.
You're climbing up. I'm like, what is he doing? You did the moonsault at 53 at that time.
But what was so stupid was putting all of those steel chairs on there.
Yeah.
Trying to go ahead and make it myself a padding there, when they were all steel chairs. That was the dumbest thing in the world.
Well, I leaned in. I said, Terry, what are you doing? You looked up and said, I don't know, Corny.
That's exactly right.
It looked vicious, I'll tell you that. But anyway.
But Bob Armstrong was under the chairs.
Yes. And he never felt a thing?
He never felt a thing. He was just completely covered up by the chairs, and I flew off of there on top of him. That would be a classic thing to do now. Somebody ought to do that.
Don't look at me.
You ought to do that, Corny.
Shut up over there. Hey, okay, after you sold Amarillo, you traveled all over the world. You were Florida, Tennessee, Japan, Georgia, everywhere. I know some of my favorite matches that you had, favorite opponents, programs, or whatever. In Memphis, it was Lawler. In Japan, it was you guys and Sheik and Abby. In Florida, obviously, it was the Briscoes. Yeah. Who were your favorite guys to work with, favorite programs that you had that you'd like to work with those guys and you could draw money?
Briscoes were fun. It was a fun deal to work with the Briscoes, both of them. Both of them were great in-ring performers. Both of them, they were wonderful, wonderful baby faces that they just had total trust in you too. You know, they really did.
Yeah.
You know, you go in the ring and you can tell if somebody trusts you or not.
Because even if there was heat, they knew you guys were pros, and there was, you know, and the matches were magic.
They were. Just loved every minute of it, because they were so damn over at the time. You know, Lawler, I loved going ahead and going in the ring with Lawler. I loved going in the ring with you know, honestly and seriously, you know, as I used. Harley, what a great guy he was to go in the ring with, and just everybody, you know, from guys like Jumbo Ceruto, Tito Santana, on and on and on.
The match with Lawler,
Lawler,
that 81 program that you had.
Lawler was just wonderful.
Well, you guys just played off each other so well.
I loved working with everybody, you know. I loved, you know, who I loved working with the most. You know who I loved? The ones that I made the most money with.
I used to take the tape of the match you had with Lawler when you did the 81 program, before you did the Empty Coliseum match, and you know, stretched it out. The first match that night, March 23rd, 1981, Memphis Mid-South Coliseum. I'm down there to shoot pictures because if you're going to be working with Lawler, I had to be there. You cost me a fortune in gas money that spring and summer. But that was the single most exciting fight that I've ever seen live in wrestling. That I used to take that tape and show it to the guys in OVW, the training classes. I'd give them notes on it. I know I wasn't there in the locker room that night. I was ringside taking pictures. I guarantee you, knowing you and knowing Lawler, you spent less than 3 minutes talking about anything that you were going to do.
Well, we didn't, probably less than that.
Probably less than that, because Lawler was playing cards. You know,
zero with me.
Yeah, and it was just, it was insane. And the best part I liked about it was you tweaked the pattern that Lawler was getting into at that point just enough where he dropped the strap to make the comeback in the middle of the match. And instead of just making the comeback and you flying right there and going home, he drops the strap and you go, okay, let's go. And he's rubbing his fists together and he makes the comeback slowly. And finally you're rocking and you take the big bump. And then just as you think there's the finish, Hart distracts him and you lower the boom and you go to the second half of the match. And then you go for the leg and tear the tights off and there's the blood and you're screaming pig and he's wearing white. And that's where I coined the term, the baby's in the air, because finally when he got the second comeback, the people, you see them, they're literally throwing babies in the air. And he's beating you with the chair on the floor. And all the girls in the front row that had seen everything, and I do mean everything that related to the boys, they're climbing up backwards over the chairs with horrified looks, and you can see them and they're running and they're scared because they were into that thing. It was a riot. And it was just, you know, it was just right there.
It's just a matter of again, you know, is that do we even understand in this day and age, you know, is what we are supposed to do as professional performers? Whether it be, you know, I mean, whether it be a movie or whether it be a play or whether it be wrestling or whatever it might be, you know, is it's the story that you tell, and it's the suspension that you put into it that you have to have. It's a necessity more than anything else, is believability. If you do not believe, it does not work. It doesn't have the stardust on it. You've got to be able, and anymore, it's Jerry Lawler. He's got a look. He's got a presence. He's got a way. Everything that he does is Jerry Lawler, and it's what he believes, and he is suspended himself. He is, not only is there suspension of disbelief to the fans, he has to suspend his own disbelief.
He's got to believe himself.
He's got to believe that he is doing it, and I am suspending belief too. In myself, everything that I am doing, I am truly doing to you. And everything that Jerry is doing to me or whatever, or you are doing to me, you are truly doing to me. That's what really makes the performer. And the performer has to do that. It's just like whenever I was on Vince's television the other day, and he said to me, not him, but they said to me, you have to do these lines. They weren't my lines.
Oh.
You know, but
yeah.
But so then I said, could I please do these? And they said yes, and they were my line. So it worked. But that's the same way. You have to go ahead and you have to have that feel and that you are who you are.
Is that why it was so easy for you?
That's why, because
in the movie, but in the movies also, because, and we were having a conversation off the air where I always hated when one of the boys would play some goofy cartoon wrestler for a little side cameo role on some comedy show or whatever. When you were in Roadhouse, you were basically playing Terry Funk as a bouncer. Yeah. It wasn't that far, but once again, you projected on the screen. Is that why it was easy for you to adapt to stuff like that? Because you were basically making it an extension. If you, instead of a wrestler, you were a bouncer. If instead of that, you were in any of your roles. Sure. It was you in that particular occupation.
Why, sure. And sometimes as I go too far. No, I really do. I mean, I'm very serious, you know, as I really believe that that's who I am, you know, in those roles and stuff.
And that can lead to trouble.
And it personally, it did lead to a little bit of trouble. Just by being an idiot. You know, sometimes you just go too far, you know, and I can't stop myself, you know.
Olivia, you mentioned that Mulligan and Murdoch, it didn't work out, and I can see that. But at that point, Amarillo and Lubbock, that had regular weekly wrestling for over 30 years, World Class expanded out there. By the time that we got to work for Fritz, we'd go every couple or 3 Sundays, do maybe Amarillo in the afternoon, Lubbock that night, or no, vice versa, Lubbock in the afternoon, Amarillo that night. It wasn't the same. The people that were there liked the matches, but there weren't a lot of them usually. It wasn't big money towns anymore. Did the people get turned off like a lot? Like when Starrcade left Greensboro, people were mad. Yeah. When the local promotions left, the people had lost faith in it, lost interest, went to do something else. Was that kind of what happened to West Texas? They wanted their own local thing, and they didn't want to, even though it was from Dallas.
No,
you know.
No. It's a matter of manipulation. It's a matter of who is running the territory. It's a matter of programming. It's a matter of whenever you have an area like that, a small area, you've got to be able to capture the audience.
Real quickly, I want to talk about 2 events in Amarillo that kind of brought the old days back, especially after World Class had folded up. WCW or WWF might come once or twice a year, but the first one, October 28th, 1993, the High Country Chevy Free-for-All. Remember, all the High Country Chevy dealerships sponsored it. It was a benefit for John Ayers at the time. They'd diagnosed his cancer, and the 2 main events, you guys were in the main event, you and Eddie Gilbert in a Texas death match that you had asked for to work with Eddie.
How in the world did you pull, where did you pull
because,
that out?
Because the tag team match underneath it was me and the Heavenly Bodies, with me in the corner against Dory and Murdoch. And I remember, because we flew out from Smoky Mountain, and I was flabbergasted and honored to get to work with at least one of the Funks. You had to steal the main event and work with Eddie. You couldn't make the tag. We could have that thrill. But Tom Pritchard...
Here you go. Going
well, no, Tom was from West Texas before he moved to Houston. He grew up when he was a kid. He watched you guys on TV, and he was over the moon. And I'm working with Dory Funk Jr. and Dick Murdoch in Amarillo, and the crowd at the Civic Center was pretty much sold out.
Yes.
At the big building there. So what was that, 6,000 to 7,000 people? Yeah. And they were dynamite. They were ready to see that show. And that was so much fun. And then 4 years later, September 11th, 1997, the 50 Years of Funk show. I didn't get to go. I was stuck in Connecticut, but that's where you wrestled Bret Hart, and you had called me in the office in Stamford to get through to Bret and make sure the okay was done. And Bret said he would be honored to work with you, and that was your last match in Amarillo. And those 2 shows, it showed by selling out, the people were still there. If you gave them something they wanted to see, they'd come out for it.
Yes.
And your name identity after, 50 years after your father moved in, 35 years after your and Dory's debut, they would still come to see the Funks in Amarillo.
Yeah.
And the WWF could come and not draw that, WCW, all the big stars, current stars, but you put those names together in those matches and promoted it locally, and you could fill the buildings in Amarillo.
I think you can fill, I agree with you, but I also think that a lot of buildings can be filled that aren't being filled because of, that was also due to very good promotion at that time.
Yeah.
And promoting very well and very hard and with great talent.
Well, if the Rolling Stones are playing somewhere in the garage and they don't know it.
But with great talent. You got it exactly right on the nose right there. They have to know it, and we let our people know it. And I think that's a mistake in this day and age. I think it is.
They think if you just put it out on the internet, we're going to have wrestling that everybody automatically knows. Oh, we got to drop everything we're doing and just change our lives. And
or they think if you're on
create a sense of urgency
on this television station that nobody's ever heard of, and or 4 of them in 1 week, and you got channel 7332 and channel 1400
in the Fernham Network.
In the Fernham Network, yeah, that's exactly right, And we think that's supposed to mean something, It's lack of promotion has a lot to do with it. But the people, the talent, it's everything. You roll it all together. You roll it all together in one hell of a damn big ball of just.
Shove it up that candy and no.
Yeah, pull it out. Yeah, pull that bullshit out.
Give me 2 bonus stories if we got enough tape left. I want to hear the story about was it Kozak and the fake deer. Tell me that one, just in
No,
person.
no.
Come on.
No. That was a good one though. But Kozak, yeah, I forget what the hell even happened on that one. Give me another one.
How about in that case when you left New York and left Vince the note about your veterinary problem?
Oh,
Survivor Series '93.
That wasn't a good one. I always tell that one. Somehow I always get to telling that one.
I remember I was there when he came in and reported it. So that's why it always got a kick with me. I was at the production meeting the next morning when he came in with the note.
What that said? Yeah, said Terry Funk is. What the hell did I say on that?
Well, they wanted you to be. It was Lawler's Nights. You were going to be under a mask for some reason.
Yeah.
They were going to beat you guys, and then they were going to take the mask off of you, and I guess they were going to piss in your mouth while you were down there.
That's exactly what they were going to do.
And you found out what the finish was.
Yeah. And so I went ahead. Yeah, that's what they were going to do. They were going to unmask me. Then they were going to beat me and beat me again.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to go for it, So I went ahead and I snuck out of town. Yeah. And I went ahead and I said I left a note. Said my horse is sick. I think he's dead.
Yeah, have to go home and take care of my sick horse.
Yeah, my horse is sick. I think he's dying. I got to go home and take care of my sick horse.
For a while, anytime anybody wanted to get away from Vince, they would iggy each other like, I got a sick horse,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you know what the worst part about it was? I saw Vince about a year ago or a year ago. He said, how's your horse? I swear to God he did.
What about the night?
Did. That's what he says to me every time I see him. How's your horse? He knows.
How's your horse, pal?
That's exactly what it is. You got it.
Hope he's doing well. With the night at Hell in a Cell with Mick and Taker.
Yeah.
Because you had to run out there and call the audible because you knew that things were rapidly disintegrating because Mick was almost killed, definitely knocked out.
Yeah.
The choke slam in your shoes.
I choke slamming right out of my damn shoes, the Undertaker did. Where's the Undertaker? What's the Undertaker doing? What's the Undertaker doing? Is he just doing dead people now?
I think he's
doing what Undertaker's do.
From the dark side, yes.
He's doing what Undertaker's do.
He's gone back to the.
He's the smartest one of us all. He's out.
He shows up once a year, gets a giant payoff, and you don't see him again.
He got out of it.
And he's not on Twitter. On Twitter. Do you know now, here's the thing that I love about the fucking boys in the business now versus used to. Used to, when the guys would have heat with each other, they'd hit each other over the head with a tire iron or cut each other in the locker room with a razor blade or whatever. Now they block each other on Twitter. Block each other on Twitter, grown adult men.
They block each other. What does that mean?
Are you not on Twitter? What the hell's the matter with you, Terry?
I don't even know what a Twitter is.
Well, see, if somebody says something you don't like on Twitter, you press the thing and block them and you can't see what they say anymore. So they can still say it, but you don't have to look at it. And they can't see what you say about them.
Yeah. On Twitter. Twitter sounds like something dirty or something.
It's a lot more twatter than it is Twitter.
It's the twatter.
What's the legacy of Amarillo wrestling and the Funk family in West Texas after now 70 years since your father first moved there?
After 70 years of my father first moving there. I think it's been longer than that, 44.
Does anybody have a calculator? It's very late at
44 is 56 years.
It's been a long damn time.
75 years. 75 years.
Well, are you going to do the 75 years of Funk at the Amarillo Civic Center? I will work for free.
Well, I guess I'm going to keep on funking if I'm 75 years into it or not.
Have you had your last match? Can we put that on record, or is there?
Absolutely. I'm gonna, but then
Was that in Jackson last year?
No, I want to have my real last match with you, Cornette. I'd like to book that somewhere.
I would be honored. If you wait maybe 5 or 10 more years, I might be able to take you. Because by then you'll have to be in an iron lung, as Jay Strongbow would say. And,
an iron lung,
and I could just pull the plug, and then you put me over.
How do you think that you act like you're some kind of of a young punk kid or something compared to an old man here.
Well, hey, let me tell you
you're
something.
no spring chicken yourself.
When I was in school, they didn't have history. That's how old I am. My social security number is 1. My mother charged the Light Brigade. Yeah. When I was a kid, the Dead Sea was still sick. But you're as youthful as ever, Terry.
Yeah,
you
why
never
you? I do. I change.
What if you look back on your career, whether it be the Amarillo territory or everywhere you've ever been, all the experiences you've had, I know you wouldn't change a thing, but what was the happiest, the most satisfying? What fulfilled you the most? What was your favorite thing about being in the wrestling business your entire life?
Favorite thing about being in the wrestling business? You know, it's not one thing. It isn't. It really isn't. It's everything. It is. I've loved everything about the business. I've loved everything that from coming in, my father coming in with other wrestlers late at night and getting up out of bed whenever I was 7, 8 years old, 5 or 6 years old, I don't know, and coming in there and listening to the stories being told, to driving down the road in a car with my mom and dad and being in the back seat, laying down on the seat, sleeping, and my brother in there too, you know, and just those things are my favorite things to remember about the business. Going to the matches with my father and just being special, you know, because he was my father, and I really love that. I love that, being special myself and having the people say, "Hey, that's a little Terry Funk here. That's a little Terry Funk," you know.
Look how he grew up.
Look at him. Look at him now. Look at him now. You know.
Terry, on behalf of every wrestling fan in the world, you are special.
I don't know. I hope I am. I hope I am. You know, I mean, I'd like to be remembered as being special. We had a hell of a time here, didn't we?
As long as you remember it, what difference does it make if everybody else?
We had a hell of a time. You know, whenever it's over, it's over. There's nothing wrong with that. When it's over, by golly.
That may be a cue. It may be over. Terry, thank you for joining us on this. Thank you for being my friend all these years and the help you've given me in more ways than I can thank you for.
Oh, God, I've enjoyed, you know, this sounds like some kind of goddamn love affair or something.
I'm the one who told you to tell me stories about cocks.
Let's get the hell out of here.
I got a room. Okay. Folks, join us for the next installment, if there indeed is one, and that is up for debate at this very point, on Back to the Territories from Kayfabe Commentaries. I'm Jim Cornette. He's a crazy Texan, a drop-kicking, pile-driving son of a sea cook. And we will see you next time.
Pile-driving, neck-breaking, back-breaking, bear-hugging, wrist-locking, knee-dropping, toe-holding, son of a gun. Meaner than a rattlesnake, tougher than shoe leather, more dangerous than a hollow-eyed scorpion. Middle-aged and crazy like a fox.